I grew up in a small town in coastal Maine, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business. My earliest memories weren't of bedtime stories or family vacations. They were of slammed doors, whispered arguments behind thin walls, and my mother's constant reminder that I was an accident they never planned for. My father worked odd jobs, fishing in the summers, carpentry in the winters, but he was never really present. When he was home, he sat in silence, chain smoking on the porch. My mother, on the other hand, made sure I knew I was nothing but an inconvenience. She didn't hit me, but sometimes words can carve deeper wounds than fists. She'd tell me I was lucky to have a roof at all, that feeding me was charity. Other kids in town had parents who came to school plays, sports games, or birthday parties. Mine never showed up. I learned early to stop inviting them, to stop expecting. Instead, I found comfort in the library. Books became my escape, a world where kids like me mattered, where parents loved their children. By the time I was 12, I understood something most kids my age didn't. My parents didn't want me, and they probably never had. I was a burden, a mouth to feed, an obligation they resented. And though I kept hoping deep down that something would change, that maybe one day they'd look at me the way other parents looked at their kids, it never happened. That realization didn't make me stronger right away. It just made me quiet, invisible. I learned to survive by not being noticed, by keeping out of the way. But even then, a part of me knew, one day, I'd have to build a life completely separate from them. High school didn't magically change anything for me. If anything, it just magnified how different I was. Kids talked about family trips, weekend dinners, or how their parents grounded them for sneaking out. I had nothing to add. I couldn't even imagine what it felt like to have a mom who worried if you stayed out too late, or a dad who cheered from the bleachers. Instead, I threw myself into work. At 14, I got a part-time job at the local diner, washing dishes after school. The manager, Mrs. Carter, was the first adult who ever seemed genuinely happy to see me. She'd ask if I'd eaten, slip me an extra sandwich on my break, and tell me I had a good head on my shoulders. I didn't know how to respond. At first it felt strange, like she was treating me the way a mother might. Through that job, I also met Jake, a kid my age who came from what I thought was a picture-perfect family. His parents would pick us up after shifts, sometimes take me along for dinner. At first, I felt like an intruder sitting at their table, listening to their easy laughter and casual arguments about what movie to watch. But slowly, I realized this was what family was supposed to look like. It both healed me and broke me at the same time. I loved those dinners, but every time I went home, back to the silence of my parents' house, the contrast cut deeper. I'd lie awake wondering why Jake got parents who hugged him goodnight, while mine barely acknowledged I existed. Still, it planted a seed. Maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to repeat the cycle. Maybe I could build something different for myself one day, a home where warmth wasn't rationed, where love wasn't conditional. I didn't know it then, but those small glimpses of what normal looked like would keep me going for years. Even when things at home got worse, I clung to the belief that life didn't have to stay that way. High school eventually ended, but instead of feeling free, I just felt lost. Most of my classmates had parents pushing them toward colleges, filling out applications, taking tour. I had no such guidance. My parents didn't ask what I wanted to do, didn't care if I graduated, and certainly weren't about to help me figure out tuition. So I worked. The diner turned into my lifeline. I picked up every shift I could, mornings before class, nights after. The paycheck wasn't much, but it was something I controlled. For the first time, I felt a spark of independence. When Jake left for college, it crushed me more than I expected. He had been my glimpse into another world, and suddenly that door slammed shut. Still, his family never forgot me. His mom sent me care packages like I was one of her kids. That kindness reminded me I wasn't invisible to everyone. At 19, I finally moved out. I rented a tiny studio with peeling paint and neighbors who fought through the walls, but it was mine. No one shouted at me. No one ignored me. It was quiet, and that silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It was peace. Living on my own taught me both freedom and loneliness. I worked a job still at the diner and also stocking shelves at night. Sleep became optional. Some nights, I'd sit on the floor of that studio, eating instant noodles, wondering if this was what survival meant, but I kept reminding myself, this was better than my parents' house. Every bill I paid was proof I could take care of myself. Every meal, even the cheap ones, was chosen by me. I wasn't trapped anymore. Around this time, I started journaling. It wasn't planned. I just bought a cheap notebook and wrote down the things I couldn't say out loud. Anger at my parents, hopes for the future, secrets I didn't trust anyone else with. Looking back, I think writing saved me. It gave me a voice when no one had ever listened. And slowly, I started setting goals, not just get through today, but bigger ones. I wanted to save enough to go to school, maybe start my own business someday. It sounded impossible, but for the first time in my life, impossible didn't stop me.
Subscribe to the channel and like this video.
In my early 20s, I finally enrolled in community college. Balancing classes with 2 jobs nearly broke me, but I refused to quit. I saw it as my ticket out, not just financially, but emotionally. Every lecture, every exam, every sleepless night felt like rebellion against the family that never believed in me. It was there I met people who would shape me in ways I didn't expect, professors who encouraged me, classmates who studied with me until dawn, one girl, Sarah, who told me I was the hardest working person she knew. Hearing that, it cracked something inside me. For years, I'd thought hard work was invisible, that no one noticed. But here, people did. My parents never called to ask how I was doing. Birthdays passed without a word, but strangely, it stopped hurting as much. I realized I didn't need their validation anymore. I was building a new version of family through friendships, mentors, and someday, I hoped, through a family of my own. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was growing. And even though the scars of my childhood were still there, I felt something new rising beneath them. Hope. After 2 years at community college, I transferred to a state university. It felt like stepping onto another planet. The campus buzzed, with energy, students debating in coffee shops, professors holding office hours, clubs for every interest you could imagine. I kept waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, "You don't belong here," but no one did. Instead, people treated me like I was just another student, worthy of being there. That acceptance was foreign to me, almost suspicious. But slowly, I let myself trust it. I threw myself into studies. Business and communications fascinated me. I wanted to learn how people built something from nothing, how they convinced others to believe in their ideas. Maybe, I thought, I could do the same one day. Money was still tight. I worked part-time at the library and tutored freshmen. Sometimes I went without meals to afford books, but I never complained. Each sacrifice was proof that I was investing in my future. And though my parents never once reached out, I stopped longing for their approval. Instead, I learned to celebrate small victories. A good grade, a compliment from a professor, the freedom of walking across campus knowing I'd earned my place there. It was during my senior year when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in years, my mother's. My first instinct was to let it ring out, but some part of me, that wounded child still inside, made me answer. Her voice hadn't changed. Sharp, commanding, as if no time had passed. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't apologize. Instead, she told me my father was sick and they needed me to come home. The word needed burned. Where was that need when I was 17, working double shifts to keep myself alive? Where was it when holidays passed in silence? Still, I couldn't shake the guilt. Part of me still craved to be wanted by them, even for the wrong reasons. I went. Not because I forgave them, but because I had to see with my own eyes. Walking into that house was like stepping back into a prison cell I thought I'd escaped. The same stale air, the same peeling wallpaper, the same weight pressing down on my chest. They looked older, frailer, but their attitudes hadn't softened. My mother barked orders at me like I was still a child. My father barely spoke. It hit me then. They didn't want me back. They wanted what I could do for them. For weeks, I helped where I could, driving my father to appointments, fixing things around the house. But every day drained me. Old wounds reopened as my mother criticized everything I did as if all those years apart hadn't existed. One night, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, the walls still lined with fading posters from my teenage years. I stared at them and realized this room used to feel like a cage. Now it just felt like a museum of a life I had outgrown. That's when it clicked. I wasn't that scared kid anymore. I was someone who had built a life step by step without them. They could no longer define me unless I let them. So I packed my bag. The next morning, I told my mother I was leaving. She shouted, accused me of being selfish, heartless. My father stayed silent, as always. But instead of shrinking, I stood tall. Driving away, I expected to feel guilt, but what I felt was freedom. This time, it wasn't running away, it was choosing myself. After leaving my parents' house for the last time, I drove without a destination. I ended up parked by the ocean, watching waves crash against the rocks. The salt air filled my lungs. And for the first time in years, I breathed without feeling like I owed someone an apology. But freedom can feel lonely too. I had spent so much of my life fighting against the weight of my parents' control that I hadn't really asked myself, what do I actually want? I thought about the friends I'd made at university, the professors who believed in me, the possibilities I had yet to explore. I thought about the businesses I'd dreamed of starting, the stories I wanted to tell. For the first time, the future wasn't a vague, unreachable thing. It was a blank canvas. That night, I promised myself something simple. I would never again let guilt chain me to people who didn't see my worth. My life would no longer revolve around proving myself to those who never cared. I finished my degree with honors. Walking across the stage to collect my diploma, I didn't look for my parents in the audience. They weren't there, of course, but I didn't need them anymore. I had earned this moment all by myself. After graduation, I moved to a new city. It was terrifying at first. Tiny apartment, no connections, bills piling up. But I had something my younger self never did: confidence. I knew that if I survived them, I could survive anything. I worked days at a small marketing firm and nights on my own project, a startup idea I had been sketching since college. Each late night fueled me, not drained me, because every hour I poured into it was mine, truly mine. Sometimes I caught myself imagining what my mother would say if she saw me. Probably something dismissive, cruel, but instead of breaking me, the thought made me smile. Her voice didn't control me anymore. The startup slowly grew. First, a few clients, then steady revenue. Then a small team who believed in the vision as much as I did. I couldn't believe it. I was actually building something from the ground up. My co-workers became like siblings, the kind I never had. They celebrated my wins, supported me in setbacks, and reminded me daily that kindness doesn't cost anything. For the first time, I understood what unconditional support felt like. And in the midst of it all, I met someone. She didn't save me, I had already saved myself, but she added color to my world. She saw me for who I was, not who my parents had tried to make me. With her, I didn't have to perform or prove. I could just be. It was strange, learning how to accept love without suspicion, but slowly I let myself. And the more I did, the more I realized I hadn't just escaped my past, I had rewritten my future. Years later, I stood outside a building with my company's name proudly displayed on the glass doors. I had employees, clients, stability, everything. I once thought impossible that my parents never became part of my life again. Occasionally, I'd hear updates through distant relatives, but I didn't seek them out. I no longer needed closure from them. The closure came from within. Sometimes, people ask if I resent my childhood. The truth, I don't. It shaped me. It broke me down. Yes, but it also forged me into someone who can stand in the storm and still move forward. I'm not the scared boy in that small town anymore. I'm the man who chose himself again and again until the world finally had no choice but to see him die. And if I could tell my younger self one thing, it would be this: you were always enough. You just had to live long enough to see it.
Subscribe to the channel and like this video.